And good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Navigate B2B. I am your host, Steve Ferreira, and I'm CEO of Ocean Audit, a global ocean freight refund consultancy based in now Weston, Connecticut. That's right, got neighbors like Robert Redford and just Keith Richards of the Rolling Stone. It's really going to be exciting. We're working on a new house. Looks like December is the date to get in, so we're really excited to get close to New York City. And as a matter of fact, it's funny that we're talking about it because Robert Redford is for the millennials and X gens. I know he's not the actor of choice, but for someone like me, a boomer, Redford has had some great movies. And one of my favorite movies that Robert Redford was in was called Sneakers. I really encourage everyone that's watching to take a look at the movie Sneakers. It is an incredible spy thriller, with twists and turns, and trying to solve the problems of the contemporary world with all its secrets and its twists. And I think that's very fitting for where we are in this phase of Containergeddon in the ocean freight industry. I think the ocean freight industry has some really curious secrets. And we're going to explore those today and expand on them a little bit in today's Navigate B2B. So welcome to the show today, and glad you found us at our new and improved time at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Always reruns on Vimeo, FreightWaves TV, YouTube, Apple, Roku, anywhere you can find streaming content. Or maybe that's the live edition. I'm so confused, but FreightWaves is everywhere. And I want to congratulate their staff and editorial and production staff for all the great industry awards that they've been gaining in the last few weeks. So hats off to the entire team at FreightWaves. Going back to the Robert Redford movie Sneakers, there's one point where Robert Redford is actually kidnapped by the CIA of all places. I won't try to give too many spoilers away. It's such a great movie. I mean, I've seen it 100 times. And so Redford is such a super sleuth, right? CIA knocks him out. They throw him in the back of this car and in San Francisco Bay Area. And so he has a bunch of guys that work for him that are great, like sound technicians and motion guys. And like they can kind of recreate, so they're all of Robert Redford's crew is asking him, what did it sound like? When you were in the trunk of that car, what was the sound? And Redford would describe, the seams in the pavement were 50 meters apart. Oh, and that's the so and so bridge, the Dunbarton Bridge, not the San Mateo Bridge. And so the final end of this little wild goose chase, and you'll see where I'm going with this, is that he is asked to describe what happens when he gets to the end of the road where this so-called incident happened. And Redford answers the question, it sounds like a cocktail party. And everyone on his team looks at him and they say, cocktail party, right? What would that mean? Because this is in the wilderness. Well, it turns out that he's taking them to this wild animal preserve where these swans are mating, right? It's the mating season for the swans. And and it sounds like, people talking at a cocktail party. And the reason why I lead the show off like this is that some people think that the world's largest cocktail party between, this is an adversarial group, right? Robert Redford against the CIA. But some people think that there's another adversarial group that's brewing out there now in ocean freight, and that's obviously beneficial cargo owners against ocean freight vendors. And the world's largest cocktail party always takes place in March. And with the lockdown concluded, I wonder what kind of receptivity this world's largest cocktail party will have if and when shippers and beneficial and ocean freight vendors bump heads. I think it will be one of the more adversarial cocktail parties in the history of histories. And we're certainly thinking that Containergeddon is changing the way that both vendors and beneficial cargo owners align with each other. That's a very slippery slope we're on. And I think we have to start looking at just how cozy, we are as beneficial cargo owners with the ocean freight vendors that have driven us to cost structures that we've never thought we would see in our lifetime. And as such, I named this episode, It's Just a Box, and WWMD, What Would Malcolm Do? Malcolm McLean, of course, the founder of containerization, created this beautiful thing, a steel or aluminum box to move cargo. And did Malcolm ever think that we'd be in a situation where we have so many black swans and so much overhang within our industry? And I wonder if, the thought process is that would Malcolm McLean apologize for what he created? And I think he might, he might apologize because he was such an entrepreneur. I had a chance to meet him back in the 80s. He was such an entrepreneur. He actually lived in the St. Pierre Hotel in New York City, had a whole suite. And he had a very interesting life. But he might have said, I wasn't smart enough to think about all the ramifications of what my beautiful box would do. And I think it's a very fitting part of Navigate B2B today when we explore kind of what's happened to that box and what are some of the contemporary issues that are impacting containerization right now in June of 2021. And I really reflect on Malcolm McLean, as just such a mentor. In talking to him and explaining to him my role at the time, I was working for U.S. Lines. It was just so exciting to be talking to the godfather, the very father that invented this particular mechanism that would go on to create, my life, dominate my life and my family's world with running Ocean Audit and being involved in maritime for almost 40 years, like I have. And so I think I think Malcolm might have a few apologies out there for what he's done, but certainly he could never have predicted things like COVID and stock market prices being at all-time high and what inflation might be. And I think that does a lot of the issues that now that obviously BCOs are experiencing. But one interesting fact that I wanted to look up just before airtime today, by the way, you're watching Navigate B2B. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. India, India got hit with such traumatic press on COVID that you would think that India was falling off the world's cliff, so to speak. I took a look at inbound India cargo from India to the USA in real time and also the last 2 historic months. So I looked basically at March, April, May, and the first week of June. One of the things that's really interesting is that in all 3 months and through the first week of June, the imports from India are rock solid, and with plus or minus 1 or 2%, it's about 60,000 TEU in that time frame for each month. India to the U.S. Ports, I think it's 60,000 TEUs, and it was rock solid. And the first week of June, 15,000 TEUs times 4 is 60,000. So I think that one prediction from India is that when they do rebound, and there are some experts now seeing a terrific rebound, not terrific, but they're getting there. So you add India to the mix. Now, granted, the cargo volumes are tiny compared to some of the Asian origin cargoes, but with India back in business, it's certainly something to look at with regards to the overall picture of Containergeddon. And I think the other thing that is really interesting, if you start to kind of diagnose, what's happening in our industry, is I just can't help how recently, I joke with everyone that the Ever Given was our industry's quote unquote big game, and I put together a little slide here. I wanted to kind of get ahead of the Reddit guys or the Wall Street bet guys and create my own meme and see if I could go viral. But the Ever Given was really our big game. But I think really on the right hand side, on every given day that we're seeing after the Ever Given, it's really the the loving cup of big games, with 11,000 and 10,000 and 15,000 and $9,000 rates, and kind of Containergeddon coming right at us. So we think about how how short time ago the Ever Given was in our hearts and minds, with even songs written about it. But what the public doesn't know is that the actual bigger game is what we're going through right now. So Ever Given versus Every Given Day. I hope you like the little play on words that I did there. I think that in the air we're seeing, to the general public, I'm sorry, to the expert community in ocean freight, beneficial cargo owners, ocean freight vendors, freight forwarders, and those of us in the know. We are seeing a new black swan. And I think that when we talk about black swan, we have to talk about really what's coming next. We had the Ever Given, and she was good for maybe knocking a few dominoes down on the string there. But I think what we're seeing now in Yantian and Sheko and Nansha and China ports, with COVID, with box productivity, with shortages, I really think we are in a new normalized format of a black swan event, where I predicted 2 or 3 shows ago we would start to see $20,000 container rates. And I think in the Asia to Europe trade, there is some credible evidence that we're starting to see that right now. So I think that the black swan event that we're seeing now in China is, I'm not going to say a double header in trouble versus what the Ever Given was, but there's anecdotal evidence that the current events in China, in terms of, and when the Chinese have a COVID infection or a COVID alert at the port, they are very tough on it, and they will shut that port down and parts of that port and that productivity. So we have to be very, very careful in terms of how beneficial cargo owners march around the China syndrome, I guess I'll call it, and how I see that as the black swan, that Robert Redford had seen in his car being trapped by the CIA. So some really weird, but really, I think, tangible analogies going on here. By the way, you're watching Navigate B2B. I'm your host, Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. And hey, yeah, I got some special news. I think my new book is dropping on Amazon.com in the next couple of days. Navigating B2B, Master Your Industry, Your Business, and Yourself, being distributed by Simon & Schuster. And really pleased to let you guys know that some experts think that this could hit #1 on the USA Today bestseller list. So really, really excited to share more of my work with you in the written word, both for those in the ocean industry and entrepreneurs and solopreneurs like myself that are trying to get the word out to improve the business lives and personal lives of all our friends and followers on LinkedIn, and especially here on FreightWaves TV. So glad to be here. And, I think that one of the things that, I started to get into, I'm visiting Massachusetts and was watching baseball with my 84-year-old mom who loves the Red Sox. And I'm starting to think about, these big hitters at bat. And I mean, I'm a real sports nut as it is. But, when I talk about big hitters, I wanted to put together some of my favorite things that are coming up downstream here. And there's my big hitters with the container ship as the bat. I thought it was great graphics. Hey, Sharif, my graphic artist, your work is just impeccable. But here are some of the things on my radar scope. And, as I start to swing the bat, I was interested in Zim, right? I'm a big follower on what Zim's doing in the New York Stock Exchange. Their stock has skyrocketed. I thought it was really interesting when they deferred their express service, from China into Oakland, and moved it down to LA because Oakland port congestion. And that kind of really falls into play with something that's an old school move. This is nothing new. Honestly, we did this, 30 plus years ago at U.S. Lines, and then when I moved over to Sealand, we would route the cargo to LA, and then we'd have a motor bridge or a truck bridge, right up to Oakland. It was totally seamless as far as the client was concerned. I think it gets a little bit more press because Zim had to defer out of the issue in Oakland with births and work productivity. So I think that certainly impacted them in terms of how they made the decision to route cargo down to LA. And I think that it certainly falls into the theme that we're seeing across the world. I looked this morning on marine traffic, and we talked about vessel congestion in Yantian, Shenzhen, Nansha, Guangzhou area. I mean, that's a serious, significant blip on the radar. And if you guys take anything away from today's Navigate B2B show, I really want you to go into marine traffic or any of the marine tracking systems, and I want you to zoom in on Yantian. I want you to really look to see, the severity of that issue. And I think that if we go back to the big hitter slide, one of the things that is really interesting is I know Gene Soroka of the Port of LA came out and said that there's some new container lines that are going to be starting service. It was also reported by one of the big media companies in the last 48 hours. I hesitate to call it fake news, but I've done a lot of research in the last 8 hours, 10 hours in prepping for the show on the two new allegedly container lines that are opening up service or trans-Pacific service. And we're talking about BAL container lines and China United container lines. It's really interesting. There was a big front page story in this other newspaper and transportation, and talking about how service is going to be going, and it made the post on LinkedIn, and Lars Jensen made a great posting on it, and there was other responses over finally hope in the Trans-Pacific, we'll have more capacity, and we'll get these rates down. And now Lars didn't say that, but I'm saying everyone in the LinkedIn community and ocean freight was always glad to see more containers come on, right? But you always have to remember, you'll never get that kind of reaction from the mainstream ocean carriers, because they're the ones that are on the other side of that cocktail party, taking it to the bank, and they're not going to want to put out extra capacity now because they're loving it. They are putting on some loaders and feeders, extra feeders to try to extra loaders, to try to get away from the some of the congestion issues in South China. But I really want to, as a major secondary takeaway, I really want to talk about this BAL container lines and this China United lines, because the issue there is that these are two Chinese-based vessel operating common carriers that have charter vessels, and maybe they own some vessels. The ownership part is unclear to me. But the interesting thing is that they do have all their vessels posted on their websites. Now, you look at this story and you say, well, there's two companies. That's great. If one doesn't pan out, maybe the other one will. If one doesn't give me space, maybe the other one will. I think this story should have been a little bit more researched, I think, before it was released, because, it's a one potential half a swan that was trying to be solved here. And I don't see the swan being saved at all. The reason why is that these vessels for both of these vendors are very small. We're talking about 1 to 2,000 TEUs. So basically 5, 6, 700 FEUs. They're relatively very tiny vessels. And the most interesting thing to me, as a industry expert, is there are larger vessels in the 4,000 and 5,000 TEU range. Keep in mind, 1 FEU equals 2 TEUs, right? So a vessel that holds 5,000 TEUs is the equivalent of 2,500 40-foot containers. Those vessels have already been, recycled. They appear to me to be charter vessels that are simply, have changed their names. But these vessels have already been calling the U.S. Under charter to other entities. So, for example, the Santiago, I believe, was chartered. I'm not sure. I'm not going to say the name of the ocean carrier that chartered the Santiago, because I don't want to be wrong. But it was one of the mainstream ocean carriers, and now the Santiago potentially, I say potentially, because neither Bal Container Lines or China United Container Lines has actually named the vessels or the rotation or the strings that they would even have in the US. But I'm here to say that I believe, in my humbleness of my opinion here, that you are, as a BCO, much better off on those freight forwarders that meet you and say, "Hey, we're going to charter a vessel." I think you have a much better chance to work within your freight forwarding network than you potentially do with these potential new entrants. For one, they haven't even announced whether they'll have a regular service. Two, as I mentioned earlier, it's clear from the research that I've done that the TEU sizes are substantially lower, which was in the mainstream media story. And number three, there's nothing from the port of LA or Long Beach that gives any definitive answer to, how, if, when these vessels will sail and when they will call. The other thing that's really interesting is that when you look at the websites, between Bal Container Lines, and China United Container Lines, you immediately start to see the websites have an identical nature and format to how they describe the vessels, how they describe the IMO, which is the serial numbers of the vessel. And so I would say that some breaking news here might be that it seems that there's some dual ownership or some duality between the two entities. No, they're not really two entities. They may be one entity, maybe controlled by another holding company. So I think that the breaking news here that Navigate B2B is breaking is that I don't believe that the story on Bal Container Lines and China United Container Lines in coming in as trans-Pacific players is going to do anything at all to Containergeddon. If anything, I think it jumbles the nature of Containergeddon because these entities don't have any sales representation. And the worst case scenario is that you may have another mini kind of Amazon logistics where they're just catering to the prepaid China market and potentially displacing U.S. beneficial cargo owner slots from accruing in either any kind of cross charter or direct, smaller TEU vessel. I say cross charter because on China United Container Lines website, they do have partnerships with some of the mainstream carriers. Well, I'll call it probably more like a slot chartering agreement, which is basically that, for this voyage, we'll give you, X TEUs or X slots per vessel. But that's not really adding any new capacity. And I think that's the most important thing, is that capacity already was there and existing. And, I'm not going to say here that this is just a good way for them to take advantage of the high rates and grab the money where they can. Obviously, they need some infrastructure, they need some agency relationships. So there still remains to be some issues how they would structure any potential sailing from Asia to the Trans-Pacific, to the U.S. West Coast, LA, Long Beach, especially given the infrastructure issues that exist and port berthing and how they'll overcome some of those challenges. So really an interesting story, but maybe one with kind of a semi like fake slant to it. I'm really less impressed with the story, and I'm actually more impressed, when I hear of a forwarder that is organizing a charter, because that's the other thing too to keep in mind with Bal Container Lines and China United Container Lines is that there will be a freight forwarder component most likely to that, and it may be kind of a gain sharing agreement where the underlying ocean carrier, in this case, say Bal Container Lines or China United, gets a bigger slice of the pie in the split. So we'll have more. We'll try to watch that story and get more information on just what exactly that means. But yeah, I wasn't really impressed with it. It was seems like such a big story, and comes to be that I think you'll find out as BCOs it's not really that big a story. So if we look at our big hitters chart, I think we've covered some of the bullets. I think that we talked about the last one is kind of my fun thing. Steve at 60 versus oil at 70. Both seem undeterred despite the fact that they're rising. So the Steve at 60 is me turning 60, and oil at 70. A great friend and author, Greg Miller at FreightWaves, wrote a great piece I encourage you all to look at about his take on what oil at $70 a barrel will do. And we start to cascade. It, the analogy of like mosquito biting the elephant, right? I made a comment in Greg's article that 2 years ago, a 10 or 15% increase in bunker fuel, everyone would be, that's crazy. What's going on? We can't afford that. Now, when that happens, it's like, okay, so if you look at incrementally, a container, at 9 or 10,000, and your bunker increases from 500 to 575. I'm not saying it is, but I think in August, September, we could probably see some type of bunker fuel increase. But it's almost like, I'll tell you what, guys, I make the same analogy as we start to close out our session today. We're going to have just a great kick-ass webinar on July 1st. It'll be myself and Tim Dooner talking very candidly about the cost structure and the recovery options and getting working capital back to BCOs that really have just been really ripped off by the whole Containergeddon aspect over the past year or two. But I think that what the most important takeaway point there is, when you look at bunker fuel as well as container offsets that deserve to be back in a BCO's hands based on some overspend that they made. Although they're two different subjects. If you look at ocean freight 2 years ago, at $1,000 or $2,000, depending on what the quantum was of the container, we're talking about all-in charges being pretty low, right? And so if you have a misrated ocean freight container in that scenario, and Soren Skov from Maersk was saying, hey, the average error is 10%. And so if you take a $2,000 container and you get a $200 refund, that's really good, right? I mean, that's great money. But now, if you take a $10,000 container and you get a $1,000 refund, you're talking about some serious, serious money. Whereas we start to repatriate our great American workers back to the workforce, into the office, there's extra costs, there's furniture, there's upgrades, there's probably massage therapists that you importers and exporters have to hire to keep these employees happy. You have so many costs. There's paper clips, there's reheating, there's air conditioning. You really need to look at cost structure. CEOs and CFOs have to re-examine every possible aspect of cost structure in Containergeddon in order to thrive and prosper and take advantage of the yields as we go back to school and have Christmas, because we are not going to see a peak season. We are going to continue with record-setting ocean freight rates that we've yet to really top. And we, as a American buying public, BCOs and ocean freight vendors, the worst is yet to come. We have to work together and get through Containergeddon by building a bridge, just like we have today on Navigate B2B. I'm so pleased to have the chance to have spoken to you today. Please reach me at stevef@oceanaudit.com or at Steve Ferreira on LinkedIn, or please watch my FreightWaves shows on FreightWaves or YouTube or any channel for the rebroadcast. Thank you all for the time today. Wishing you all a great weekend with peace and love, and signing off. I'm Steve Ferreira, CEO of Ocean Audit. Have a great time. Have fun this weekend. See you next week.